new on this, and some of us have been here before, so welcome everybody. Today's meeting is open to the public and will be webcast, and the recording will be also available for the public to view later on. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. If anybody's got any mobile phones on, just switch them off, and if they do ring, then please take them out elsewhere. Apparently there is no fire test plan for today, and if there is one, it's an emergency evacuation. So just run towards the Town Hall Assembly Point at Tudor Square. I'm Mohammed Mahroof. I'm the new Chair of Economic Development, Skills and Culture Policy Committee. And what I'll do now is, from my left, ask other members to introduce themselves. Rob.
I'm Councillor Robert Rice, Councillor for East Ecclesfield.
Good afternoon, Barbara Masters, Councillor for Council.
Good afternoon, Councillor Denise Fox, Councillor for Burley Ward.
Henry Nottage, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward.
Mark Whittaker, Councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Nikki Belfield, Councillor for Firth Park Ward.
Minesh Parikh, Labour and Cooperative Councillor for Crooks and Crosspool.
Good afternoon, Chair. Ibby, Ullah, Councillor for Nether Edge and Sharrow Ward, also the Deputy Chair of this committee.
Thank you so much for that. And can the officers on the top table also introduce themselves, please?
I'm Rachel Marshall, Principal Democratic Services Officer.
Hello, I'm Sherry Grant, I'm Assistant Director for Legal.
And we have two young people here today as well, sat on my right. They're on work training? Work experience. They're wanting to be politicians, so they're coming in and listening in. So no recruitments today, but clearly they won't be asking any questions. Thank you so much for that. Apologies for absence. I'm not aware of any. No. Exclusion of the public and press. I don't think there's any items that we're excluding the public and press from today. And members' declarations of interest. If any members got any interest to declare, please put your hand up and declare your interest. None whatsoever? Sure. Minutes of the previous meeting. So I'm going to look towards people who were actually at the previous meeting to say whether this is correct or not, because I certainly wasn't. So I think there are a few people here. So we'll go page by page. Page number 1. Just shout out, please. Fine. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And finally page 7. All correct? Can somebody just nod? Thank you so much. Minutes are accepted. I'll sign them in a few minutes.
Yeah, that's
fine if you don't mind. Moving on. Public petitions, questions and statements. We've not got any. No. None there. Members' questions. I don't think we've got any here today, but we've got quite a number at full council, so we'll entertain ourselves then. Work programme. The printed version that you've got today is an incorrect version. The work programme is actually populated and will be circulated in due course. We've not got an empty work plan at all. So it will be heavily populated as we move forward. I've been reliably informed. So moving on to item 8, which is the Connect to Work item. I'm assuming all members have read it, so as far as officers are concerned, just give a brief outline of the report and then we'll put it out to questions. And you're taking that, Diane, are you? Yeah. Thank you, Diane, and Laura, just take it from here then.
Thank you. Laura's going to read and
lead the report for us, and then Gail's going to talk through some case studies around the work that's related to this report to try and bring it to life for members. Then we'll take questions afterwards. I'll hand over to yourself, Laura.
Hi. This is around the Connect to Work programme, a programme that is coming in during this financial year. The recommendations of the paper are to note the aims of the Connect to Work programme, which will support some of the people with the most significant disadvantages in the labour market to get closer to and into employment. We're really keen to highlight the positive impact that the Council's local supported employment programme has had, which this funding will continue and expand. We want the committee to formally approve the receipt of £7.28 million for the period of September this year to March 2030, improve the appointment of the delivery staff and commissioning of the community-based delivery providers that are intended, and the remaining recommendations are to approve the role of that the Council will play in respect of Connect to Work as it's described throughout the paper. To give a bit of background, the programme consists of two delivery strands. One is the Supported Employment Quality Framework, which I'll here on refer to as SEQF because it's quite a mouthful, which will support people with learning difficulties and or autism to gain employment, but it's also intended to be expanded to some other groups such as those with brain injuries and care leavers. And the second is the individual placement support, which I'll refer to as IPS, which will help those with mild to moderate health conditions, which will be regionally commissioned, and then more locally commissioned some other cohorts such as refugees, asylum seekers, ex-offenders and others. The SEQF will replace and grow the local supported employment programme that we've been running across the region and locally from Sheffield City Council for just over 2 years so far. It provides really intensive support with job coaches having small caseloads and supporting people into employment, which might start with volunteering and then move to very short work hours. But the important thing is that people to continue to get that support from the job coaches as they initiate work and as they grow their hours, with the idea that the job coaches fade away over time. The IPS will replace the Working WIN programme that has been delivering across the region for a longer period of time and is currently run by the Short Trust. And it replaces that as well as the work and health programmes that have previously been commissioned regionally by DWP. So as Diana alluded to, these reports can be a little dry, but this is actually quite an exciting opportunity for us because it expands some of the work that we do, as I say, with some of the people who are harder to get into the labour market, and thus that intervention has a really massive impact on their whole lives. So I've asked Gail, who is one of the job coaches, to come along and talk about the case study that is mentioned in the report, which is around Victoria, but also I think she'll be able to talk about some of the other individuals that she's worked with over that 2 years.
Hi there. It was about a year ago that I first met Victoria. I was accompanying one of my other participants to an NHS apprenticeship assessment session, which was one of these big group assessments that can be extremely daunting. I would find it daunting myself, but when you've got, when it's your first job you're going for and you're neurodiverse, it's almost an impossibility to understand what's going on and what's expected of you. I had a referral for Victoria about 2 days beforehand, and I knew she was going to be there, so I introduced myself, but she was so nervous that she was completely shut down and could barely speak to me, and just kind of acknowledged that I had spoken to her and who I was. I had a meeting with her about a week later at Hillsborough Library, because one of the things we do is work out in the community, so we'll use community settings such as libraries and family hubs, things like that, to meet people in so that they feel more comfortable. I was struck immediately by, when we were talking one-to-one, at how articulate and self-aware she was and how much more confident she came across to when I'd first met her. And realised that what I would need to do was to work on showcasing that individual, the person that she was showing to me right there and then, to an employer, and get past that, the nerves and the fact that when somebody's autistic, they will just shut down completely, and that makes it almost impossible to communicate. You know, if somebody was asking her a question, she just wouldn't answer. We spent some time working on what is known as the vocational profile, which is quite a lengthy document, asking about persons' likes, dislikes, what adjustments they might need in work, how confident they feel, their communication style, and that all gives me an idea of what they might be good at, what they would enjoy doing, and what, if I need to speak to an employer on their behalf, what adjustments I can ask that employer to make for that person, all stages along the way, from application right through to when they actually get the job. So with Victoria, she loved shopping. I swiftly realised that she loved Meadowhall. This was her happy place and a place where she felt very comfortable, which was quite a shock to me because I found it too busy and extremely overwhelming. But we would quite regularly go to Meadowhall and have a look round and see which shops she felt comfortable in, and that gave me a really good idea of who we could look to applying with. She was also quite keen on supermarkets. So I would help her with her job search because she found it very difficult, as most of the people I work with do, to navigate job search websites. And there's a lot of information, so she was just finding that really overwhelming to sort of go through and work out what was relevant for her to read, because a lot of it is not, you don't really need, there's maybe about 10% of the job description that you really need to take in. And before long we started getting interviews. So we did go for one interview at one of the major supermarkets, and I found it extremely difficult to get in touch with them. I had emailed HR several times. I tried to go into the store to speak to somebody, and what happened when we eventually went to interview, I hadn't been able to get hold of anyone to talk about adjustments. And although that person was very friendly and tried her best to make Victoria feel comfortable, because we hadn't been able to have that discussion beforehand and have everything set in place for her, she was also deaf in one ear, so the person needed to speak to her. The person sat behind a computer and kept having to lean, I'll lean this way, then you can hear me, and kept sort of leaning round so Victoria could see what she was saying and could lip read. But by this point, she kept having to say, sorry, I can't hear you, sorry, I can't hear you, and it just went downhill. Contrast that with the place where she eventually found work, and that was Primark. They were extremely receptive. I managed to get in touch with somebody. Well, I put a note. When you apply for these jobs, there's always a button that you can tick where you can say what adjustments you'd want. A lot of employers ignore that, or they don't, contact you to ask in more detail what you actually need. But Primark did. They contacted me and Victoria very quickly and asked what we could do. So we agreed that she could go in an hour early. She could talk to her interviewer an hour before that she was actually going to go in and sit and do the interview, that we would have the interview questions and I could sit and go through them with her. So that's not me answering for her, but it's me trying to drag out her answers. She's, as I said, she's very articulate, but when the nerves descend, she will just shut down. So they were great They made us both very comfortable. They brought us juice. The person that was going to interview us kept coming back and saying, do you need more time? So by the time that we went in, Victoria was saying, I feel really good here. One of the things that she loved was to read, and she noticed they had a little library upstairs in the staff kitchen as well. So I think that made her feel that this is the place for me. When we went into interview, she was so relaxed because she'd got those questions in advance, because people had come and checked in constantly to make sure that she was okay and she wasn't feeling too nervous, that she didn't need to rely on her notes as much as she might normally do, and was able to sort of make jokes and where appropriate, and just show more of who she was rather than just sort of reading from a bit of a script, which sometimes is what can happen when you've got those interview questions in advance. One of the other things I did, she was offered the job, and they said, the Primark again, let me come into her induction. Inductions can be really difficult as well for anybody that's neurodiverse, because again, loads of information that's being flung at you, a lot of which you don't need. So I sat and took lots of notes and then put them together for her afterwards in an email document. I also went in on our second day, where she was put immediately on the till, which you can imagine in Primark in November. Absolute chaos, but she loved it. And what I realised was that even though to me that seems like the worst job for somebody that's autistic, she didn't see the queue stretching out the door. It was one person after another, and it was the same interaction again and again and again. And at the end of her shift, she turned to me and said, I could do that for another 4 hours. And I thought, wow. I went in, so one of the other things we do is continued in-work support. So I would go in and sort of shadow her for an hour, make sure everything was going okay, check in with her boss, make sure everything was going fine. She was getting customer reviews. People were putting in reviews saying how good she was. She was commended on 2 separate occasions in the time she was there. And she said to me one day when I went in, this is the best thing that's happened to me. I feel like my life has completely changed.
Fantastic.
I know. So she's now, she, unfortunately, retail being what it is, they weren't able to keep her on after Christmas, but Victoria has continued to go from strength to strength and is now in a full-time permanent job in an office as an admin assistant. She works 3 days a week, and every time I go in to see her, she's learning more and more and more. And she's got friends at work, she's less isolated, and it's just great to see how well she's developed.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Hopefully that brings to life some of the actual work and the human impacts of some of these figures and numbers in the report. The other thing I just wanted to bring to your attention was this investment is a 3-fold increase in the work that we've been able to do in that programme, supported employment programme. So we'll be supporting over 1,000 people, and we'll be getting a vast majority of them into work and then in supported work for over 6 months. But as you've heard, once they've had a taste of work and built that confidence and able to do it, then they can go on and find full-time employment as well. So we'll end it there, and happy to take any questions, and hopefully seeing the life behind the report is also useful. Thanks.
Thank you for that, and thank you for giving the case study as well. I'll come in with my comments at the end. I've got Councillor Rice, Councillor Masters, Councillor Fox, and then Councillor Nottage, and then Councillor Whittaker, and then Councillor Belfield, and then Councillor Ibby. Minesh, go on, join in.
Well, thank you for the contribution, Laura, and thank you so much for the hard work that you've put into this, particular into Victoria, but I'm sure a number of other kind of people that you've helped, Gail. It's certainly inspiring to see the work that you do. I'd like to kind of examine the pipelines into the system to begin with, in terms of how do people get referred into the Connect to Work programme. Are there organisations, are there kind of systems which you kind of look out to and say, actually, is there anyone that you would fit into our programme? Like, where are the people coming from? But then at the at the back end in the employment, is there any kind of documentation as to kind of employers who have best practice? So, Gail, you mentioned Primark and the work that they do in kind of trying to make their kind of workplace inclusive. Is there a way of, have we got a system of saying these are the best people to work with? But also, as kind of those companies that do show limitations in their kind of accessibility of the workplace, are we able to, most likely outside the Connect to Work system, and potentially working with them, say how do we improve the workplace, how do we improve the employment of those with health conditions, with neurodiversity, to make sure that we are trying to improve kind of employment opportunities across all employment sectors.
I'll start and then hand over to Laura, if that's okay. Yeah, so just in terms of improving the workplace, we've been working across the region at South Yorkshire level on a whole set of campaigns and work around work and health, and it's a really core part of the employment strategy that this committee commissioned and approved last year as well. So it's a core part of everything that we do. We often use best practice employers. We had a huge event in Sheffield with about 300 employers there, and we held a session talking to some of the best employers in South Yorkshire around what they're doing, how they're doing that, what that looks like for them, and ultimately the business benefits of it as well, which is really important. So we are absolutely working in that space and will continue to do so. If employers do want to get in touch, we're always willing to support them through that journey as well. People can feel like it's daunting, but there is so much support out there, and businesses do get so much out of that. All we need is a phone call and we can help them through that journey. So just a plea to anybody kind of reading the report or watching today, please do get in touch with Opportunity Sheffield and any businesses that you come in touch with to help us on that journey. In terms of referrals, do you want to cover that, Laura?
Yeah, so Connect to Work is one of the programmes, and some of the longer term councillors on this committee will know that I've already been to committee this year around a UK Shared Prosperity Fund programme that we run, and also an Economic and Activity Trailblazer that we run. And the way in which we do that is to work with our voluntary and community sector partners, because actually those organisations are based in communities. They're able to work with people in communities. They do outreach into communities. So what we're able to do is sort of have a no wrong front door approach, but ensure that behind the scenes we look at which service is able to support that individual the best, because historically, excuse me, historically there's been far too much of the front door you walk through is the service that you get, and we're really trying to streamline that in Sheffield and make sure that people get the most appropriate service that they need.
Councillor Masters.
Thank you for that. Really, I suppose it's just clarifying a few points. I wasn't clear from the report whether you are recommissioning or whether you're sticking with the same providers. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is we know that the political landscape has changed with sort of employment laws, and I'm just concerned that you're going to find it much more difficult to engage with employers because of that, for all sorts of reasons. And the last point is, I mean, you'll have heard this before, page 33, existing and future employment, all right? So it's sort of knowing what skills we should be looking for in the future. And I'm assuming, Diana, this is part of the Works programme that we haven't seen yet. So it's just sort of looking to the future as well, because it was mentioned in this bit of the report. Thank you.
So I'll go backwards. So in terms of the future skill needs, there've been a lot of work done as we've developed the employment and skills strategy to look at future labour market requirements. And you'll remember, I think, the Power BI tool that we purchased as part of that. We've actually just agreed to sort of continue to update that as we go forward, so that it can allow us to look at some of those future demands. There's also some work ongoing with Simca where they're doing deep dives into various sectors to predict skills needed and also support with pathways into those. So that hopefully responds to where we are on the skills prediction side. In terms of commissioning of providers, the supported employment, as you know, we commission a lot of providers in the other work that we do, but actually, because of the fidelity model around the supported employment, the way we've started that, which has been a small programme, has actually all been delivered, excuse me, in-house. But the intention with this programme is now, from next April, to start to commission providers, but it will be new providers because we've not had any providers delivering in this space. In preparation for that, we've been doing some capacity work, building work with those providers to get those models of support that are required through this fidelity model, so that they are fully trained. Obviously, we're working with people with significant barriers to the labour market, and obviously we have to be very careful that the quality of delivery is high.
Just coming back on the kind of the landscape, the economic landscape, it isn't easy out there at the moment. The cost of living crisis is still very real, and business on the high street are still struggling at times. However, there are sectors which always require staff, and growth sectors as well. So there are employers out there that we are still working with and are managing to achieve our job targets and our profile at the moment. But anything anyone can do to introduce us to employers who are willing to kind of work with us, that would be really useful. It's also, it doesn't always have to be a job, a full-time job, and then so incurring that national insurance cost. There are volunteering opportunities, work trials, interview trials. So there are a range of ways that employers can get involved without taking somebody on for an employment perspective as well.
Thank you for that. And just to clarify, sort of, you said that you were going to sort of get fresh providers. Now, it's the quality as opposed to the cost, and I'm concerned that we're going to lose this valuable sort of expertise that you've built up over the time with the targeted services. I mean, how can you be sure that a larger concern won't come back with just a tick box exercise? Yes, we'll fulfil this. It's sort of quality, not just cost.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that. The team are excellent at this. We really want to work locally with people in the local community who are connected into the communities that we need to work with. So we don't just score on cost, we score on quality, on social value, and make sure that the people we're working with are the right people for that cohort, because we understand how important that relationship is. So I hear you on that, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. My questions have been touched on, but just to expand, and my question was about referrals too. I mean, do these people come from DWP, or are they from communities or whatever? Or if we're out and about doing our surgeries, etc., and community work, which I come across people, if we were to know, is there somewhere where we can refer them to as well? That's one. And the other thing that I just wanted to add about the training and things, Sheffield Sparkle is a local charity which I've worked with, and they go around employers, training employers about neurodiverse for free. But they also have a lot of people on their books that they may be able to help you or refer them to you. So might be a good idea for you to contact Sparkle, and it's a Sheffield charity. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Really quickly, yes, all of the above. We work with DWP, we work with the community organisations. One thing that we have put in recently is to have one phone number, one place to go on a website. So absolutely, I can ensure that you're all furnished with the details of that, and then our triage staff are able to talk to people and ascertain the best service for their needs.
Thank you. Councillor Nottage.
The problem with there being so much interest, my question's already been touched on as well. Big increase in funding is fantastic, regardless of who ends up being the providers. I hope they get to recruit a lot more Gales, because thank you so much for coming and running us through the case study. I hope there wasn't a dry in the house after that. The big takeaway for me was the difference in the employers, and Councillor Rice already asked about this. and through Sparkle and other organisations, I hope we can really get out there into more and more employers and change their attitudes, because it sounds like a much better outcome for the employer as well as the individual. And in terms of accepting the funding, no hesitations from me, and it's great to see it for a few years.
Councillor Whitaker.
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation there. Now, presumably being a sort of open public meeting, I must preserve confidentiality, so I'll speak in vague terms. But in my ward, which is Stocksbridge and Upper Don, it's a sprawling ward, there's a wonderful community cafe that has taken on, presumably through you, someone with special needs. And I had a report back at a meeting I went to just a few days ago from the organisers, saying this person is absolutely thriving. Being a community cafe, it's like a family, you know. It's not got quite the sort of high-octane pressure that a city centre cafe would have. But that meant she could settle in and become comfortable, acquire the skills, and then she will be able to transfer those skills into a more robust environment in future. So what I was going to then, the question aspect was something that's already been asked, was if I encounter more places in my ward like that, charities and stuff like that, where placements are possible, I would be keen to try and do it. And how that is done has been answered, so thank you very much.
Councillor Belfield.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions which haven't been asked yet. The first one, I was reading the SIMCA's information about their Pathways to Work Commission, and it seems like there's a lot of crossover looking at those who are economically inactive. How does this new funding from the government link in with their programme of work? And then the second question, I just thought, brilliant case study, and just goes to show actually the kind of adjustments that have to be made are really straightforward. And it's like other colleagues have said, it's about raising awareness. And yet again, I'm going to mention the Buckland Review into Autistic Employment, which came up with lots of recommendations and worked with employers who are very good at adapting their workplace for neurodiverse individuals. But in particular, they have the Autistica, which is the research charity they worked with. They have the Neurodiversity Employers Index, and it's, I suppose, like Investors in People. There's a certain level you can get to, and they gave out their first awards, and I was just looking, and I was pleased to see that the Diocese of Sheffield got a silver award. So it feels to me like this is something we could be pushing organisations and employers towards if they need some guidance, and hopefully get some other Sheffield names up there winning future awards, but also getting that message out that, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. And given that I think it's, 75% of autistic people who are unemployed want to work, yet only 29% of autistic people are in employment, compared to 50% of disabled people generally. So that is quite a stark difference, yet I think to overcome that gap is relatively straightforward.
So I don't know if you recall from the previous committee, but the Pathways to Work is supposed to be an umbrella to employment and skills across the region, and then the programmes come in underneath that. And so what we're trying to do, you may remember the sort of diagram that was used in the Pathways to Work Commission that was done in Barnsley, which was that it had a systems steward, which sits at regional level and is a partnership between SIMCA and the ICB, and there is a governance board based around that. And then there is a systems service manager, and that's the local authorities in each of the areas. So what we try and do is bring those funds together, sort of, and commission that so that it's quite complicated actually from our perspective in terms of sort of the audit and the funding and all the things that we need to be absolutely assured of are correct, but so that it sort of hides the wiring for the deliverers and the people who are the recipients of the service. So I hope that answers your question.
I was just going to add again that the team do a really great job of that. It is very complex, the funding landscape, and at the outside, describing it at the top level, it can feel the same, but underneath it, there's very specific T's and C's around which individuals can be supported through which programmes, but that doesn't make sense to be out there in the customer domain. So even in terms of how we commission in the third sector as well, we kind of bring all the funding together and then we commission and manage how we manage the outputs across the piece. So they don't overlap, they do complement each other, and there are still some gaps. If you use all of Pathways to Work funding, like the umbrella, and the Connect to Work, there'll still be some groups that aren't covered. So that's where shared prosperity funding money comes in, allows us to fill those gaps, and any local investment that we make from Sheffield City Council, again, allows us to fill those gaps. So we're always looking at it from the entirety, but it is a complex moving picture. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ullah.
Good Chair. My question has already been touched upon by Councillor Rob Rice as well as Henry. But I just want to say thank you for coming today to give us a real insight how personalised and intensive support can make a difference to someone. It's great to hear that Victoria is still in employment, so please pass our best regards for her. This programme continues existing work and expands. Do we have any other participants at the moment in the scheme, or are we having a fresh new cohort of participants or service recipients? Thank you.
Yeah. So the scheme still runs, the existing scheme runs and recruits up until the end of July, and we plan to be at our full capacity, which is 20 people per caseload, and we have 4 job coaches currently working on it. So those people will continue to be, the idea is that you stop recruitment in a programme, but then you have quite a long period of time to then support them. So we will continue to support all of the people on those existing contracts through the current funding. But then with this, we will be able to slowly build up so that we're still able to seamlessly move on to be recruiting more people, because actually, it's not difficult to recruit people for this programme because of the success and because the increasing amount of people who have these issues and just to say as well, just because we are doing some commissioning of it, we will still very much have our team in Sheffield City Council. We very much value Gail and all of her colleagues that she works with. They do an absolutely fantastic job, and we'll be expanding that team a bit too.
I just want to add that the Local Support and Employment Project did get one of the best audits in the country in terms of how it's run and its outputs. So it's not just us saying that, it's other people as well. So yes, there'll be those current cohorts continuing with us, but there will be new people as well, as we've got 3 times the amount of funding, so we can do much more than the 8 people that are currently in it. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks all. It's really, really refreshing, actually, compared to the national conversation about how we can support people into work, to see this, person-centered approach we have in Sheffield, that it is working, that we have, very human stories. But I think the scale is very impressive as well, that, the work you're doing is happening so many hundreds of times for each individual, providing that background support. It's quite, it is an incredible thing to hear about. My question, unbelievably, hasn't been answered yet. I think, the thing that stood out for me most is the length of time, like 5 years worth of funding and increased funding. I just wanted to hear more about the impact that will have both for us, but also the partners we work with, to have that long-term sustainability of funding and what that means.
Thank you. I'm happy to take that. It's absolutely essential in economic development generally, but specifically on this programme, because we need to work with people sometimes for quite a while to build confidence to get them into work, and then maintain that support in work, because we want them to have long-term employment and get that support. So annual funding just would not work for a programme like this. So you need to have longer term sight of kind of what you're doing, you also get much better relationship building, commissioning, job retention. There's so many benefits from multi-year funding, and it's really welcome that we've got that in this space. We could do with it in more spaces, just to make that clear.
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions? I think we've had a comprehensive set of questions from every member here, so you've engaged every single one of them, which is brilliant. I've just got a couple of comments and observations. I mean, I have actually discussed this with you before. One thing I am pleased about, and you've taken on board, is bringing case studies here, because I think that really brings it to life. Otherwise, all these reports that we bring to committee are all numbers, and it doesn't mean anything to anybody, and people just switch off. So if we can continue with that theme, that would be extremely helpful, and as long as members feel that is something that they find benefit with. That is my feelings anyway. That's what should happen. So thank you for that and taking it on board so quickly as well. Secondly, in terms of employers, employers do want to engage, and I've seen that in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and in my previous roles in private practice, I've seen people do want to engage, but they need to be approached. And sometimes they worry about being where there's local authority or central government involved in it. They feel as though, oh God, that's going to be a bureaucratic process. I don't really want to get involved in it. My key driver is to get better profits. I think we need to be a little bit softer on that if we can be. And the key to all this is, and it came from the awards that were handed out last week by Richard's team's Lifelong Learning and Skills, where the number of employees we had wasn't as high as you'd probably want to expect. I mean, you'd probably want to expect much higher numbers in employers, but they are out there, and we really should reach out. In fact, on Thursday, there is one employee that we've talked about, Diane, who's now wanting to come on board and will start talking to us about taking people on. I mean, the other part of it is, and I think everybody almost touched upon it, or majority of members have touched upon it, is we need to be open about this, publicise this. One thing I have noticed in this committee so far is we need to publicise a lot more of the good stuff that we're actually doing. And I think people have come up with that, saying, where do we send inquiries to? So that will be something that we really need to major on a little bit more. And finally, I think, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't underestimate the sort of work that we're trying to do here, because I have one experience of my own, which shall remain anonymous. The lady she couldn't do an interview at all, and people want to do the traditional interview process, and this was at a learning institute. And when we got across to them that this person is not going to be very successful at the interview, anyway, cut the story short, it's a family that's never had any higher education. She's the first family member that's come out with a degree and is now into looking after young people. So it does work. It has a huge impact on people, and a lot of the people that I saw last week were very keen to promote themselves and say, look how wonderfully well I'm doing. So I think the work is brilliant. It just remains for me to say that if members, I think we just need to approve this, don't we, to receive the funding. Is everybody happy to receive the funding? I think we've got unanimous there. Thank you so much. Moving on to our second report, and I think Richard's taken this one. It's the Adult Skills and Grant Agreement, which for some reason I've got growth plan delivery here. But
Can everyone hear me? Okay. So my name's Richard Smith. I'm the Head of Lifelong Learning and Skills here at Sheffield City Council. For those of you that I haven't met before, our service is almost a sister service, I suppose, to Employment and Skills, albeit we sit within the Early Years Education and Skills Directorate. We are a service that delivers education. We deliver what we call study programme education for young people between the ages of 16 to 24, so that's very much aligned with the school services. That's particularly working with young people with special educational needs, and that runs from a provision called Sheaf Training Centre. We also have an apprenticeship provision funded by central government, and that works out of the Manor Lane Centre, the Careers Development Centre, and that works with apprentices from the ages of 16 right the way through to any age in adulthood, although about 2/3 of our apprentices are between the ages of 16 and 24. And then the final part of the jigsaw is the Family, Adult and Community Education Service, the FACES team, and that's why I'm here today. So that's a provision that works with adults over the age of 19, again delivers education to them in a range of different areas, particularly focused on core skills, things like functional skills, digital skills, employment skills, but which also subcontracts a degree of our provision to partners around the city that deliver on our behalf. So the reason that I've come to committee today, as I say, is around the latter part of what I've just explained, the FACES team. We receive annually, or have received annually over a number of years, a grant allocation from South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority. For the last few years, certainly the last two prior to this one, that's been set at £2.27 million. And what was an indicative allocation is now confirmed by the Mayoral Combined Authority's board meeting just last week, is to retain that at 2.27 million for the forthcoming academic year 25-26. So my reason for coming today is twofold. One is to, a bit like the previous item, really to request permission from this committee to receive that funding into Sheffield and for the Lifelong Learning and Skills Service to continue to administrate that. And the second one is to ask the committee to note that it's our intention to subcontract in the way that we have done for many previous years, to the tune of about £650,000. So that again is commensurate with what we've done before. The reasons why we subcontract provision are sort of threefold really. One is looking for niche areas that we can't deliver ourselves within our service. One is particularly around high demand areas, which relates back to those functional skills, particularly English as a second or other language is a high demand area. And thirdly, it's in relation to reaching into communities. So a lot of the subcontracted providers who choose to work with us or who request to work with us through a procurement process are very much embedded in their local communities and very much trusted by their local communities. So they have, we find, a greater reach and a greater ability to reach some of the more vulnerable communities in the city. So that's our intention, that's our request today. Last week, Councillor Mahroof made reference to the fact we had a Lifelong Learning and Skills Awards here at the Town Hall in the reception rooms. Very grateful that Councillor Mahroof was able to join us and Councillor Ullah in their roles as Chair and Deputy Chair of this committee. I don't know whether it is useful, but a bit like the previous item, there were a couple of examples there of people that were nominated for awards and who won awards, which perhaps might bring a bit of life to what I'm trying to describe today. So if you'll forgive me, just some of this is going to be read, but we've got a number of subcontracts, as I mentioned, in the niche areas, one of which is with an organisation called Construction Skills People. They nominated a learner, who I won't name just for reasons of broadcast, but a learner who had been enrolled onto one of their introduction to construction programmes. Actually, this was probably 18 months ago, had successfully completed that. But then life took a negative turn for this learner, and actually they found themselves serving a custodial sentence, and obviously all the challenges that brought to them. It was a significant setback for them. It became a turning point in their life, and this is how they described it. They used their time as a time for reflection, time for self-development, planning what would come next. And having got the introduction to construction already under their belt, funded through this Adult Skills Fund that I'm here to talk about today. Once they left prison, they were determined enough to enrol onto a civil engineering and groundwork skills boot camp, which is a DFE funded provision. So slightly separate from what we offer, but I think the importance of this story is that progression in learning. What starts with adult skills, which starts with introductory courses, then can lead on in this case to not only a boot camp in civil engineering and groundworks, but then through RGD Construction, which was a leading civil engineering and groundworks company, they were able to offer a job to this person, which is really a full-time role, in fact, which has really cemented not only their learning, but their future pathway. So it was very sort of encouraging and quite moving on the day to not only hear this story, but to see this individual receive an award. And to be quite open and frank about the challenges they've been through, but how adult skills had helped them. And just by way of contrast, I've got a second example from last week's awards of a learner who arrived in the UK relatively short time ago from Somaliland, facing all the challenges that you would expect anybody to face arriving in a new city, a new country with a new language, a new way of life. And this female learner fully embraced the opportunities that were available to them. And this is somebody who signed up for one of the English as a second language courses I mentioned, and so have used that to develop their communication skills. Now, for this individual, their motivation was very much more about, it was very personal really. It was about supporting her children, being a positive role model to her children, showing her children the importance of education, of self-development, of resilience and perseverance. And through that, that's being achieved, that continues to be achieved, but actually they've also got a long-term goal of work, and once completing their course, wants to work. What's happening at the moment for this individual is they're using their English language skills to volunteer through the ISRAC Centre, get involved in sewing classes to help support other learners coming through. And so there's that real impact on the community around that person, and the real impact as well that it can have on family and on independence and on embedding yourself, I suppose, in a new society, in a new community. So again, this is somebody that was recognised last week. There are lots and lots of examples of this, but I think it perhaps brings to life there is a diversity as well in adult skills funding, from construction and civil engineering to supporting families and working with people that want to take part in civil life here in Sheffield. So they're examples, but as I say, back to the point of being here today is to request the permission to receive the funding and to ask the committee to note that it is our intention to continue to subcontract. I'm happy to take any questions about that.
Councillor Rice, Councillor Masters, Councillor Nottage, Councillor Whittaker and Councillor Berwick and Councillor Ullah.
Maybe we should just start that process, start with me, and then I can ask all the questions and everyone else can just go, oh, just do what Rob says. I had a brilliant conversation last week, I think, with an organisation called Prisoners Building Homes, which does very similar moving testimony from an ex-offender that has been given some absolutely brilliant kind of life training and has turned his life around. I believe there are some projects in Sheffield that they are active with, and it would be interesting to see us tying up with them, because they've already got an established kind of education base in the area. You talk about and you've made a point of the funding for the next year being held, I'm going to move this slightly closer so people can hear me, being held at 2.27 million, which is no increase from either the 23-24 or the 24-25 funding periods. I was just wondering whether this hold in funding, despite increases in kind of costs associated with well, everything, is going to in any way hamper your ability to provide a similar or better service than you have in previous years. And finally, and this relates both to this agenda item but also to the previous agenda item, it only kind of clicked in whilst you were speaking, on neither of the agenda items, and I am aware that sometimes this information is confidential, especially with smaller cohorts, that no demographic data as to the people that were helped or those involved in the process has been presented to councillors. Has it been collected? Will this be able to be circulated for both this and the previous agenda item? But then also an assessment as to whether or not the cohorts and demographics that have been assessed or have been helped through these programmes, whether it is providing, whether a social value assessment has been conducted as part of this, and whether it has been identified whether the work taking place sees the greatest possible, within reason, social value uplift as part of the assessments for the work going forward into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think, so thank you for the Britain Building Homes. Sorry.
It's prisoners building homes, yes. It's I believe I'll bring this closer to me again. I believe it's a joint venture between the Ministry of Justice and the DWP, if I remember. But if you just Google prisoners building homes, there's enough information online about that.
So thank you for that connection. As you can tell, it's not an organisation I have worked with before, but I'll certainly follow that one up. Just to take your 2 points in the order you asked them. So the 2.27 million, yes, it is a freeze, and therefore, in real terms, with cost of living increases, I guess is less than we've had before. So the money we receive, as I said, is through South Yorkshire's Mayoral Combined Authority nationally. The money that the DFE has given to MCAs and to unitary authorities has reduced this year. So the government funding for adult skills has, I think, by about 3% come down nationally. So we locally, or certainly regionally in South Yorkshire, the decision was taken by SIMCA for grant-funded providers to retain the same amount of funding, and obviously we're grateful for that in light of national picture. What we're hopeful for in years to come, if we move to single settlement as MCA, is that, and the MCA have indicated this to us, is that they would like to look at multi-year settlements again, a bit like the previous item, because that would allow us to plan our expenditure and plan our resourcing and work with some subcontractors over a longer period than just the year, because I think all subcontractors find that challenging as well, year on year. But in terms of our delivery for the year ahead, we're confident we can deliver to the same level and the same degree. There will be some tightening of belts and there will be some efficiencies, not in terms of the staff force that we work with. We can accommodate that, but I think we just need to ensure that we're using each class as effectively as we can and making sure each class is as full as it can be, and that we're starting courses, that are reaching as many people as they can reach. On that point as well, in relation to demography, so this paper that I bring today, and I've done this in a couple of previous times in previous years, to receive the funding, we will then follow by coming back to committee with a report on how the money's been used and the demographics of people we've reached. But I can tell you today, though, that at the end of the academic year that we're in, so today's data, we look at two figures. We look at the number of enrolments onto courses, and we look at the number of actual individual people that relates to, because people do sign up for more than one course. So currently we're looking at this year having enrolled 2,000 individual people, thereabouts, just slightly shy by a couple of tens, onto 3,300 courses. So that tells you, obviously, most people are doing, well, an average of 1.5, just over 1.5 courses each. So some people doing more than one. Those courses are sometimes short in nature, workshops over a number of weeks. Sometimes they're longer, over what we call a school term. And then for the more in-depth courses, and bearing in mind people don't study with us every day because they have other commitments. So for example, in our level 2 GCSE equivalent maths and English courses, they might run over a couple of terms. That tends to be about the longest that we work with. 78% of the people we work with this year, according to the data I've got available today, are from a minority ethnic group, which is high, but I think it's reflective of the number of people that are looking to develop their English language skills, certainly those like the lady from Somaliland that have moved to this country, but also people from the UK whose English language needs to increase, and mathematics skills who haven't had opportunity through school. However, we are doing some considerable work to try and address a bit of an imbalance with our white working class communities, perhaps people, again, linking in with Laura's service to think about economic inactivity and moving. So very much what we're doing is aligned with what Laura's service are doing to try and bridge that gap and help people along that pathway. We also look at demographics from a postcode disadvantage background. So again, 75%, just slightly shorter than the other stat, are from a postcode that's recognised as being in an area of disadvantage. We do get a slight funding uplift on some cases, depending on where that is through SIMCA, based on a funding formula. But so I think what we're trying to do through that is target communities where it's needed, where support is needed most. Social value assessments, no further really than what I've just shared with you. I think there is some work to be done there. What SIMCA are looking to us to do under their 3 mission areas is to align all of our delivery with the 3 missions that SIMCA have laid out. So moving people closer to the labour market, developing core skills, and then moving people on to higher and further learning above GCSE level. So that's less about social value, that's more about progression within learning, but I think we can look at those from a disadvantaged background and perhaps come back to you with some more information on that at a future time. But I can share these statistics in a more easy to understand table if that's helpful.
Could I just very quickly say thank you for the information, and sharing it with the committee would be useful. And it's disappointing to hear that the funding for lifelong learning has been reduced given its importance in both the integration, community cohesion, but also the economic activity of disadvantaged communities. So yeah, it's something that we do as a council wider need to be pressing on, because I can see the benefits that it can have in our city, given the kind of the differences in social outcomes for certain communities. But thank you for the information.
Thank you for that. My colleague has asked my question, which was about sort of the level of funding, whether to maintain the programme that you've got. So I shall, and you even answered my supplementary if you didn't answer it, so all I can do is to sort of make a comment. I mean, I was very concerned at the start of this programme about the aspirations of it compared to the possible delivery. And I'm so pleased you brought the casework. So you have sort of mentioned before sort of the way the programme's evolved. So thank you for that. Great to hear. And I can see the value. And I've sort of done some work with community payback. So I'm all for giving offenders a second chance. And if he came back to continue his programme, it shows that you've been really effective. Well done. Thank you.
Councillor Nottage.
Real term cuts. Councillor Wright asked it. You've answered it. That's it.
Can I just come in and say, if we, in the next committee, start on the other side of the room, just give the others a fair chance asking questions.
Every now and then, could we start in the middle?
Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you, Chair. A while ago, I had cause to be involved with a small local construction firm, employed about 20 people. They were, you know, like a family firm. And I got talking to one of the people there, and he confided in me that he was an ex-offender, and he'd taken training as a scaffolder. Scaffolding is a lot more complicated than people give it credit for. If it's not done right, you know, the things can spin around, not distribute the weight properly, and all sorts of things. He had been finding it extremely difficult to get jobs, but this small family business took him on. I mean, they weren't hidebound by a big business's strategies. They could judge things by their own evaluations, and they took him on. And it turned out this person was so grateful to have a job that he became pretty much their best employee. And the owner confided in me that, you know, he was the one who would stay on late at night to make sure all of the stuff was taken down safely and stuff like that, and was really pleased with taking him on. So he was an ex-offender who'd been in prison. So this is clearly working. This is clearly something that's a good idea that you're doing. So what percentage do you think of offenders who might want to go into some sort of job like construction, do you think can be offered these sorts of training possibilities? Is it a tiny percentage? Obviously not everyone who comes out of prison is interested in this line of work anyway, but of those who are interested, do you know what sort of percentage could get any training?
I'm just trying to think of the best way to answer that question. Certainly within obviously the prison system, there is, as you will know, there are educational opportunities. Within this academic year, one of the subcontractors that we've worked with has worked with prisoners on day release, because we are allowed to use our funding directly to support that. We're not allowed to use our funding into prisons because that's through the MOJ. But in terms of the availability of adult skills provision, for the most part, when it's delivered to individuals, whether they be ex-offenders or anybody else, it's free at the point of delivery. So a simplistic way to answer your question might be to say that all ex-offenders that have left the criminal justice system would be able to access the provision. I suppose the more important point is, how do you motivate and how do you encourage people to do it? How do you reach those communities? And I'm not sure, as I sit here today, that that's something that we've fully explored, and perhaps something we need to go back to a bit more through the links. I mean, the example I gave as a case study was through one of our subcontracted providers, construction skills people. We've clearly got organisations that are working closely with us that might be able to give us a route into that. So that's something, if you'll allow me to take away and see whether I can pursue further. But as I say, the positive of adult skills provision, with the exception of some of the employability skills, for example, if you want to learn how to develop skills in childcare or construction for that matter, some of them might be means tested if you're already in employment, but for the most part, for those that aren't employed, they're free at the point of delivery. So I don't think that should preclude anybody.
Councillor Perrin.
Thanks, and thanks for the report and the case studies. It's really helpful. Mine was just a quick comment, really. I often make a point of going through quality impact assessments to see what they say and how comprehensive they are, and it's really welcome. I think this is the first time I've seen a specific reference to the Race Equality Commission, and obviously you're talking about how important that is and how fundamental that is to the programme, so it makes complete sense. But yeah, just a very strong equality impact assessment and great report in general.
Thank you. It's credit to my colleague Shabazz who wrote that, but I'll pass that back to him. Thank you.
Councillor Ullah.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, I also attended the award ceremony in the town hall last week, and please thank you to your team for arranging that. I was really blown away by hearing some of the stories, just the transformational impact it had on the learners. I don't think if you don't attend, not see and not hear, you don't get to appreciate how much a difference it makes. Not only would they help them with their education, it was also the well-being, the confidence, and social skills. So, you know, I'm a big fan of what you do. Going forward, as mentioned before, there are two organisations in my ward who are very keen to deliver adult skills provisions in Netherridge and Sharrow, and they'll be in touch with you shortly. Me and Mahroof, we've seen what great work you guys do and what impact it has on the learners. How does the rest of us in this committee get to see, or maybe visit some of the learning centres across Sheffield to see and meet the teachers as well as the learners? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. I mean, our awards are only annual. Maybe we need to think about doing them more regularly, but they are annual at the moment, so my apologies to the rest of the committee for having invited the chair and deputy. I think maybe next year we could open that invitation more widely. In the meantime, certainly visits to some of the provision that so within our direct deliveries, we call it the offer that we make, we work out of a number of centres in Sheffield, which have got multiple classes happening at once, so there would be opportunity to visit those. We'd be able to arrange that very easily. With the subcontracted providers, obviously, we'd have a conversation with them, and we could make arrangements there too. Some of them are quite central, some of them are more in communities, so easier to reach than others. But if it would, if it would help, I could circulate an invitation. We could try and find a date where we could do some visits if people would be interested in doing that. Yeah.
Thank you for the report, Richard. Any further questions from anybody? Yeah, just a couple of observations there. I think one that Councillor has already picked up on is when we get a lot of funding, although this is not a huge amount, this is probably a reduction, but we could do with more funding. It's good to see who are actually providing that service, because some of the criticism that we get is a lot of money's gone in there, where's it being spent? And I think we need to be a little bit more open. We are always open, sorry, wrong words here, but we need to publicise more the fact that these are the organisations that are working with us, because one or two people have contacted me saying, how do you actually get on the list to procure this sort of service from the council? So it'd be helpful to have that sort of insight into it. Apart from that, I think looking at the areas that you're targeting, I think there's a huge number of people out there who are economically inactive, and initiatives such as this can make them economically active. And I came across a lot of people last week and subsequently who really think that this does benefit them. So I think it does have a huge amount of benefit having this sort of service being provided to them, albeit at a very low budget. So I can understand where you're coming from. All it remains me to say is that Councillor Rice.
Sorry, it's something that you mentioned, Chair, in the fact of kind of provision, where it's going, kind of which organisations are using it. It's just a thought off the top of my head, given that we're often talking the people who are kind of attending these sessions, going through lifelong learning, do come from more disadvantaged backgrounds, often rely more on public transport. Is there any consideration when we look at providers for this as to kind of accessibility of their kind of learning centres. I know in certain parts of the city that do have kind of high levels of kind of white working class, those who might have more difficult educational backgrounds, that they do sometimes also have problems accessing public transport. I'm thinking particularly in the West Ecclesfield ward, High Green, communities up in Councillor Whitaker's ward in Stocksbridge and Upper Don, but also the communities at the top of Stannington, that public transport accessibility for those communities is kind of not as good as the rest of the city. So I was just wondering, I'm not expecting an answer, but whether that could be a consideration as to which providers we take on in future. Thank you.
I can briefly answer that in the sense that with our procurement process, we ask a whole range of questions, as you can imagine, in order to be able to score and then decide where to issue contracts. So accessibility is among those questions, location is among those questions. Obviously, we can't control who it is that comes to us to seek the opportunity to work with us. What we can control is where we work and what we deliver through our team of tutors. And there's always more that we can do, and I'm always very conscious that serving one community possibly means not then serving another. We are in conversation with one of the steelworks in Stocksbridge who've approached us to offer some digital skills to their workforce, and they'd be happy to open that up to others in the community. We're not currently doing anything in High Green and Sheffield, so there's always more that could be done, and I think certainly travel around the city is a challenge, which is why it's important for us to take the learning to the community. So yeah, thank you for that.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. And thank you for picking that up, because I think that's a very important point as well. There are other communities that we need to reach out to as well. So thank you. Yeah, all it remains for me to say is, are we happy to receive this funding? Thank you, Richard. And that concludes the meeting today, apart from the date and time of next meeting. To be announced. Thank you, everyone.